So today in the studio with Rick LePage, we're going to talk about vibration reduction, image stabilization, when you should use it, when you shouldn't use it, how it's evolved over time. Well, hey everyone, Hudson here. I got Rick LePage with me.
Howdy.
We've been having an unbelievable amount of fun here in the studio. We're kind of gearing up for our printing workshop in February. Well, a couple of printing workshops, and we've got printers going all over, proofing, making sure that they're all doing great. And we've torn apart an older, wonderful Hewlett Packard 24-inch roll feed printer that had a belt failure, and it's been pandemonium.
It has been pandemonium. Yeah.
So anyhow, welcome to Approaching the Seam. We're going to talk about vibration reduction a little bit, just because I've had an interesting kind of rash of questions about it, and I think it might be somewhat involved with people moving from the DSLR age into the mirrorless age. And when they had DSLRs, there wasn't built-in image stabilization.
Yeah, it would come in these big lenses. Is really where you see it.
Right.
Yeah.
And now it's sort of in the camera all the time. And so there's the question of, well, should I be turning it off when I'm doing still life or landscape or slow shutter speed work? We'll delve into all that. We'll answer those questions. Again, the short answer is, if you're using an old camera and old lenses, well, yeah, maybe you should. But the newer gear is so smart.
Yeah.
It's just so smart that I don't ever turn it off in the cameras that I shoot with. But we'll talk about why. And also about sport versus normal mode on the lenses that have the built-in gyros and image stabilization. So real quick though, I want to talk about Cuba fast.
Okay.
Because we had two workshops in 2020 where we were going to Cuba, and literally we postponed them at the last second because the pandemic broke out, and then we rescheduled them, and Cuba held the pandemic off really well, but then Cuba got hit right as we were going to try to rerun them in 2021, so early 2021. So we are running those workshops this spring, April. April. We have two, and we had them completely filled. In fact, pretty much the workshops have been filling as quickly as we post them this year, but we did have a couple cancel for the second Cuba workshop. And as we tape this, there is an opportunity for one or for two people to come along in that workshop, and it's going to be incredible. The streets of Havana, we're going to be eating amazing food, meeting local artists, staying in these mansiones in old Havana in a beautiful hotel with a view out over this spectacular carved limestone valley in the agricultural region of Viñales. We'll have local guides, amazing local food. Everything's included once you get to the Havana airport. It's on a helping the Cuban people visa, and it's going to be spectacular. I can't wait to get back.
Yeah.
So an opportunity there for a workshop. So vibration reduction. Do you ever turn it off these days?
No. I mean, in the old days when I was shooting Canon, 5D Mark II, Mark III, we would have, I'd have my 70-200, and I would, if I was on a tripod, the vibration, I think they call it IS, image stabilization on the Canon lenses. That was off. And
Canon was image stabilization, and then Sony was optical
steady shot.
Nikon was vibration reduction. Now, of course, they've joined the crew. Canon won. It's in-body image stabilization now, or image stabilization. My first image stabilized lens was the original the original F-mount 70-200 VR. And then I had the VR2. And then the FLED. And by the time it got to the FLED, for sure, you didn't need to turn it off on the tripod.
Yeah.
The camera was smart enough between, I think I was shooting with a Nikon D810 then and a D500. And the camera and the lens were smart enough to know it doesn't need to be activated. There's no motion happening. Leave it, it's not going to, and also just the motor was probably better and it wouldn't vibrate the camera on the tripod. And there was no image stabilization in the body. I still have this beautiful old 105 millimeter 1.4 macro. And one of the coolest things when I originally got my Z7 and my Z6 mirrorless cameras was the in-body image stabilization, and the fact that all of a sudden Now this
Yeah.
non-stabilized 105 millimeter ultra wide aperture big heavy lens has an image stabilized body to work with. I
Yeah.
can shoot it in lower light handheld. And yeah, I haven't looked back. There are lenses that we have, like I've got the 100 to 400 is my lens, and the 800 I use image stabilization to incredible results.
Yeah.
I've shot that 800 millimeter prime down to a 30th of a second in burst mode
Yep.
handheld and gotten sharp images, 1 out of 10, let's say.
Yeah.
At 60th of a second, 80% are
Mhm.
sharp. If it's motion's going to blur,
Right.
but
Right.
but you're not getting shake. And I don't ever find a need to turn it off. The cameras are so smart now. All of my Nikons, all the Sonys that I've shot, and the Fujis, and everybody's Canons, they all are smart enough to know when to activate and deactivate image stabilization. I think the one question is, as you go into your settings, you see there's image stabilization on, image
Mhm.
stabilization active, or sport. Some people call it different things. There's normal, there's off, there's normal, and then there's sport mode or active.
Yeah, and that must be in the Nikon. I don't
You
believe
don't have it in
Sony.
the Sony.
No, it's got a sort of auto mode where it turns it on or turns it off.
Right.
On some of the lenses, like this is my 100 to 400, I've got 2 different modes on the lens,
Right.
and those are for sort of to help with sort of your sport mode.
Right.
But I know from a Sony's perspective, the in-camera stabilization works in concert with
Yeah.
the lens-based
Right.
stabilization.
Right.
And that's one of the things that's kind of cool about it. And I think it's probably the same on the Nikon side.
It is. You
Yeah.
get some level of image stabilization, say with a lens like the 14 to 24
Right.
or 2.8 that doesn't have built-in
Yeah.
stabilization, but you get a whole another level when you get to one
Yes.
of the bigger telephotos that are they're built-in image stabilization
Yep.
as well. It compounds. I think that the Nikon system with its sport mode, which I get a lot of questions about, it isn't for photographing sports. It actually is. What I've traditionally been told by people from Nikon is that it's paparazzi mode. You're on the back of a
Right.
scooter and you're chasing after the car trying to get the photo of the person inside, and you're bouncing down the road and it's bouncing down the road and everything's moving and you are not in a state. It is vibration reduction to the max, and I would not turn that on the tripod.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I've never personally used it, but let's say I was in some situation where I'm bouncing along in the back of a truck trying to film something behind me in another
Yeah.
vehicle or something, or shoot
Mhm.
something. Yeah, maybe. If I was in a truck trying to film a motorcycle chasing me on a rough road and I'm strapped in holding the camera bouncing around, sure, I'll flip it into sport. That's what it's for.
Gotcha.
Otherwise, I think you just leave it on normal and you leave it on all the time. I have not turned it off for any of the Milky Way work that I've been
Yeah,
doing.
yeah.
So I don't think there's a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Sony recommends auto for
Yeah.
for the in-body stabilization.
Right.
And that it's, the camera's smart enough to know that it needs it or doesn't need it.
Yeah. In the beginning, I had it in my eye menu just by force of habit to be able
Yeah.
to flip, but I'd never change it. So it's like, it could be in the My menu where it's easy access, but it doesn't need to be in the I menu
Yeah.
where it's
Yeah.
taking a spot there. All right. So that kind of wraps that whole thing up. Rick, it's so great to have Rick around here in the holidays, and we've been just, like I said, gearing up to get the
Yep.
studio ready for the printing workshop and having a lot of fun tearing our hands and faces and everything apart
Yes.
in printers and
Yes.
putting them back together and getting error messages and taking them apart again. But we're going to do a few of these in the studio back and forths, and I'll air those. I'm going to be traveling a lot early here in 2023, so it'll be fun to have some of these teed up while I'm on the road. And I'll be filming some stuff on the road. I'm going to be in Mexico for several weeks, some having fun, kite surfing with my friends, hanging out with the kids on the beach, and then also scouting for an eclipse workshop in 2024. Total Eclipse is going to go from Nova Scotia down through Texas and parts of Mexico, and so I'm scouting Mazatlan for a workshop where it's warm and sunny in the spring and more likely good weather for that eclipse. So keep that in mind. Check out when the 2024 Total Eclipse is. Maybe mark that on your calendar if you'd like to join Rick and I someplace warm and sunny to photograph it.
Yep.
Cool. All right. Thanks, everybody. I hope you're staying safe, staying creative.
Yeah.
See you next week.